So having said that, okay, I will kickstart today's answer analysis. So for the viewers out there, if you have any questions for me, okay, please drop it on the comment segment. And for the actual participants, okay, likewise, if you have any questions, you can always unmute, okay, or you can utilize, okay, the chat function within Zoom to ask questions. Okay, I'll leave it to you. So probably as a start, I'd like to gather some feedback. How do you all find this particular case? Okay, from a difficulty scale of 1 to 10, okay, how would you rate this case? Okay, 1 being exceptionally easy and 10 being cancerous. Okay, you can type it out in chat. Right, okay, so the average is around 6.5-ish. So it's kind of the slightly difficult kind. So maybe, okay, I would like you guys, okay, to type it out. Which questions would you like me to emphasize a little bit more? Okay, so that I can prioritize, okay, the order of going through this. Like I've said, we probably don't have a lot of time today. Okay, somebody brought in CDE. Okay, the last 3 questions, CDE, CDE. Okay, great. Okay, my lighting just collapsed. Okay, so, okay, I'm going to focus on these 3. Let's quickly screen through the extract. We can see that the extract is about public housing. So you got to form some ideas. Okay, what is likely to be tested for public housing? We can see that, okay, HDB resale prices hit records high even when supply ramp up. So we can probably deduce that, okay, the first 2 extract 1 and extract 2, see government land sales creating more housing and commercial sites. Okay, they are likely related to the concept of what we call demand and supply. So demand and supply is likely to be present. So check your script, okay, whether you have used the demand and supply approach or framework. Right? So you can see that property fever, band-aid, not the cure. So what does fever tells us? Okay, it means that property prices is what? Exceedingly high, right? Okay, so you want to be concerned about high property prices. Okay, and the concept of band-aid tells us what? Okay, that there are some property measures that are in place. So later on, we are supposed to look out for what are the property measures in place, but it was stated here, not the cure. We got to look out for what are some of the limitations or constraints, okay, for implementing such property measures. So later on, we will see in one of the questions. Alright, extract 4, okay, is an extract 4. Yeah, extract 4 is the crucial part. Okay, so you have to make some deduction of what concepts are likely to be tested from the heading itself. So it tells us that there are greener homes. Okay, greener homes. Okay, the word greener simply tells us what? They are likely to be spillover effect. Right? We often encounter such concept, okay, of environment. So what are the spillover effects, okay, when you consume a HDB? And I also want to point out there are several key points here, okay, that you want to be concerned about. Cohesive communities. Okay, support national objectives such as racial harmony and stronger family ties. So once you're able to conceptualize that there are spillover effects, it's likely to be an externality. So you want to find out what are the spillover effects. Now, of course, there are more, okay, but I'm just pointing out a few here. Okay, so for you as a consumer, when you reside in HDB, okay, you are indirectly supporting national objectives. You're going to promote racial harmony. These are spillover effects. So we can conclude that, okay, HDB consumption is what? What is the type of good for HDB? Or what does it exhibit? Okay, for the viewers who know, okay, please type it out. Okay, positive externalities. Alright, and actually the focus of today, okay, if you forget everything, okay, especially for the viewers out there, I want to focus on table 1. Right? Table 1, okay, they are displayed in indices. Okay, so this is a kind of question that we don't normally do, or rather, there's a lot of troubles when I see that a lot of students are dealing with indices. Okay, so today, okay, we'll spend a little bit more time. We realize that you probably will lose more marks in calculation-based question. I hope you guys calculated something earlier on. Okay, if you haven't calculated something, then you probably will suspect that some marks will be taken away. Right? I hope I haven't let the cat out of the bag. So now let's quickly screen through the questions. Okay, so for my students, for AYE students, I often advocate to look at the questions first. So just now I actually did the reverse. I look at the extract first. Okay, by right you should be screening through the questions first. Then, okay, you form a hypothesis. You validate your hypothesis by looking through the extract. Okay, so we can actually see that there are several questions that test you on demand and supply, right? Okay, so which are the questions that are testing on demand and likely? Okay, you see? Keeping a lead on prices. This is likely to be a DDSS question. Okay, and we can actually see that here. DDSS. Account for the trend in private residential property. DDSS. See? With the aid of diagram, explain how the change in price of residential property could result in a change in commercial property prices. DDSS. Okay, and to be more specific, you realize that we have to identify the relationship between residential and commercial property. So if you haven't identified the specific relationship, okay, good luck to you. So I'm just curious, okay, for the viewers out there, if you know what's the relationship, please type it out in the chat function. Okay, likewise for the live students in this group. Okay, I'd like to hear from you. Okay, and I see people shaking their head. Okay, it's not a very good sign. Right, you can see. Question D is also DDSS. Okay, how do we reduce prices of property? Okay, we have to use demand and supply measures. Right, so demand and supply can be tested both ways. Okay, you can use to establish Egypt and wet peaks factors, and you can also use them to establish how to use the price mechanism to lower prices. Then you probably want to focus on fall in demand or an increase in supply here, okay, to address increasing property prices. Then we can go back into the extract to look out for what are the demand side measures, what are the supply side measures that are in place. So realize that the composition of this question is very centric among DDSS. Okay, it is not a very usual, that's favoring market failure or externality. Only the last question. Okay, by now, I mean, just now all of you has actually identified that concept of externality, positive externalities are being present. Okay, so today, okay, we'll be focusing a lot on DDSS questions. So if you realize that your DDSS concepts, they are not so good, okay, please speak to me, okay, I can help. So with that, okay, I'd like you to prepare your correction pen, okay, for the viewers who have attempted this script. Okay, I will be marking and you and your parents will be hearing from me for this lecture test. So I wish you guys all the best. Do you have your correction pen? Do you all have the book with you? Okay, I'll also be referencing with the book. Okay, so having said that, now let's look at the first question. Okay, with reference to table 1 and extract 1, okay, compare the changes in price of HDB resale and commercial shop space between 06 to 11. So we are, okay, so commercial shop space, right? And HDB, what again? HDB resale. Okay, these two. Right? Are we good with these two? And my head is blocking. So the keyword here is compare. Okay, so what do I often advocate when you see the word compare? What are the two things that we need to find out? Quick, type it out. Okay, don't be caught napping. Okay, one similarity and one difference. Okay, so similarity is rather straightforward. Okay, both of them have been generally increasing. Not difficult, right? You can see. Okay, they are generally increasing. So now, what is the difference? Okay, so the difference, you got to identify, is there any reversal in one of them? Or you got to identify the rate of change. Okay, which one is faster or slower? So unfortunately, I don't see any reversal. Both all of them are generally... Okay, maybe shop space reverse. Okay, you can possibly entertain the idea that there is a temporary reversal in prices between 07 and 09. Okay, but I want to focus on the main difference. So for those who bring in difference, make sure you calculate. Anyone brought in difference? Or rather, anyone who brought in the rate of change difference? All of y'all brought in that the shop space experienced a reversal. Okay, so I'm going to accept the alternative. You can tell me that shop space experienced a fall in price level. Okay, between 2007 to 2009. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to calculate price changes. Okay, or rather percentage change. So if you want to calculate the rate of change of prices, okay, you have to what? Okay, how do we get this 83.8%? Okay, so you have to use your index of 2011 minus 2006. Wait, new minus O over O, right? I'm so sorry, why did I use 2011? Okay, let's verify this. Yeah, there's some typo in this. Alright, so now I want you guys to take out your calculator and join me in this calculating activity. Okay, so we are supposed to calculate the rate of change. Okay, so if you state that HDB prices is increasing faster, then we need to use the latest index minus the earliest index over the earliest index. Yeah, I must be sleeping when I'm typing this. Okay, now let's look out for calculator. Okay, can you all verify this? Okay, we have 190.4 subtracting 103.6 divide by 103.6 times 100. So it's 83.8%. Right? Y'all get that? So when you deal with indices, you have to be really careful. You cannot subtract directly. Okay, the only instance when you subtract directly is when you experience the base year of 100. Then you can subtract directly. Remember, because anything divided by 100 is going to give you this. It's going to give you the difference, the exact difference. Okay, so there are some tricks around this. Okay, so please note this formula by heart. Okay, so it is the index of the latest year subtracting index of the earliest year, or whichever earlier year that you want to find out, over the index of the earlier year. Okay, and always be mindful whenever there are presence of indices like this, there is a need to calculate. Clear? Okay, so sorry, typo. I'll get it changed. Okay, and now A part 2. With reference to table 1 and extract 1, explain how the supply of new flats might help to keep a lead on prices of resale flats. So what is a lead? Keeping a lead means what? And remember when you're boiling a kettle, we have a lead, right? What does the lead does? The lead prevents the steam from coming out, agreed? Okay, so if you are going to put on the lead, it means that you are going to prevent the steam or the price from going up. So this is how you want to to identify or to relate, okay, if you don't understand what is keeping a lid on something. Right? Sometimes when you make a hot cup of coffee, you will put a lid on top, okay, to maintain the temperature of your coffee. So you are supposed to identify the relationship of new flats and resale flat. So I just want you guys to be extra mindful, especially for the viewers out there. Okay, the relationship, when a question, okay, introduces two categories of goods, okay, you have to be exceptionally mindful. Okay, what are the relationships being mentioned? What is the relationship between new flats and resale flat? Anybody knows? If you know, you can type it out in the chat. Okay, if not, okay, I'm going to go through the answers first. So we can see that the interaction, or rather the increase in supply of new flats, is going to exert a downward pressure on price of new flats. First, right? You got to introduce, or you got to explain the concept of what is the outcome of your new supply of flats. And next, okay, you got to illustrate how are these two related. Okay, so they are substitutes, or what we call competitive in demand. Okay, I'm not sure whether you have identified this. Do you see that? So, okay, a flat buyer can either choose to wait for a new flat, or they can buy a resale market flat directly. So these two are competitive in demand. Okay, anyone did not identify this? So with a fall in price in new flats, okay, this will lead to a substitution effect and a fall in demand and prices of resale flats. So this is how you want to explain how the lead comes into the picture of suppressing the prices of resale flats, okay, that we actually see in the earlier question. Okay, so key concept that is tested here is competitive in demand. Okay, so always be mindful, okay, when there are two categories being introduced here. Later on, we are going to experience one more question like that. So you realize that how extensive demand and supply is tested in this question. If you're not good in that, okay, then good luck. So next, we are supposed to describe the trend in private residential property over the period. Okay, so now let's look at private residential property. So this is the one, right? Is this the one? So we can see that this is a trend description. The keyword here is describe. So what are we supposed to look out for when we look out for trend description? What are the two things that we need to look out for? Quickly type it out. Okay, two things. But Dylan came out with one. Okay, so not bad lah. Okay, you need to look out for the general trend and the anomaly. General trend and the anomaly. So we can see that the general trend is generally increasing, right? So the anomaly, we will want to look out for whether there is a reversal or there is a sharp increase or rate of change. Okay? So I am happy if you can tell me that there is a slight reversal. Okay, so let me establish this first. Generally increasing. Okay. So you want to tell me that there could be a slight reversal between 07 and 08, or a sharp increase of 31.2%. So for students who did not calculate the sharp increase, I will minus marks. Okay, because you are presented with data, you need to treat the data properly. So let's verify this figure again using our earlier example. Remember, okay, how do we calculate rate of change? We use the latest index minus the earlier index over the earlier index, right? Okay, so we can actually observe that between 06 and, is it 06 and 07? Okay, 06 and 07, this is the highest. So some of the students, if they don't calculate properly, they may state 09 and 10. Okay, 09 and 10, if you do it at your own end, is going to result in a lesser increase in percentage price. So let's verify the set of figures. Okay, so everyone, please take out a calculator and join me. Right? Okay, so let me see. Okay, if you have already tabulated the answer, you can key this into the chat. Okay, we have the 170.8. Okay, this is 07 minus 130.2 divide by 130.2, okay, times 100. Okay, so we experience a 31.2%. Okay, everyone has the same. The 3SF is good enough. Okay, so you realize that the concept of index or indices is tested twice, right? So these are the marks that you can secure if you know how to look out for index. Okay, so so far so good. Any questions for me? All right, okay, I am going to move on to part B, part 2. B part 2, okay, it is a related question with B part 1. Important, why? Because if your B part 1 and B part 2 are inconsistent, you'll be marked down. Alright, so now, okay, let us look at how are we going to address consistency here. So if earlier on you establish general trend, okay, general trend, you can see that has been generally increasing, right? So you're supposed to identify demand factors that supports the general trend. Okay, so you can see here. Okay, if you look at extract 3, okay, let's verify. Okay, is there low interest rate and increasing income? See, healthy economy. Okay, this tells us that there is higher income, right? Okay, so this is an Egypt factor. Okay, for viewers who are new to the concept of Egypt, okay, this is our book. Okay, this income factor. Okay, so always be mindful to look out for economy. Okay, because okay, you never know. Okay, that this is an income factor. Likewise, a recession will be also an income factor, but it's a fall in income. All right, interest rate is not within Egypt. Okay, but it still affects demand. Okay, so I just want you all to put a star here. Okay, interest rate. But interest rate is more used in macro. Okay, but it can affect your micro's demand as well. Okay, so it's not often used in micro. It's only applicable for specific asset classes like property, okay, or purchase of car, big ticket items. Okay, so it's not often used, but in macro you often use this. Okay, so you can utilize either income or interest rate to explain the general trend. So if you use income, okay, or healthy economy, make sure you relate to purchasing power. Okay, and relate it to demand and causing price to increase. If you use interest rate, then you have to use different set of criteria. Okay, you need to talk about access to credit. Okay, and this will promote more bank borrowing. Okay, do note that a lower interest rate has nothing to do with disposable income. Okay, for those who put disposable income, I will mark you down. Nothing to do with disposable income. Interest rate does not affect disposable income. Only taxes will affect disposable income, especially direct tax. Okay, so interest rate is all about access to borrowing, your cost of borrowing. Okay, I also accept COB if you use the word COB here. Alright, so for the general trend is generally straightforward. We'll use demand and supply concepts to illustrate that. So remember, B1 and B2 must sing the same song. Okay, so if B1 you stated a reversal, then you have to illustrate the second point. Okay, this is 4 marks, right? Okay, 2 marks for general trend and 2 marks for reversal. So you want to illustrate why is that a fault? Okay, if you stated reversal. So you can identify price cooling measures. Okay, you can illustrate direct tax. okay, or stamp duties to reduce the speculative demand. Okay, today I'll also be introducing new concepts of direct tax. Okay, so the concept of taxes in property especially, okay, is you have to look out for direct and indirect tax. I will move on to part D or part D later to illustrate that. Okay, so direct tax will always affect demand. All right, if you use rate of change here as your second factor in B1, then okay, you can use a secondary demand factor here. So if you talk about income, then the second point you talk about interest rate. Clear? Okay, so if you use sharp rise, then you can substantiate with a second demand factor. Well, erase this typo. So the whole idea is, remember, identify the correct trend and sing the same song in part B, in the second part of the question. Okay, so usually 4 marks. Okay, so 2 marks will be allocated to general trend. 2 marks will be allocated to the anomaly. See how you can use demand and supply framework there. Okay, make sure you have all the key terms present. Is that clear? Alright, part C, D, E will be the focus. I understand that it's difficult. Alright, so like I've said, every time when the question introduces you 2 categories of goods within the same question, and the phrasing asks you, how does residential property prices affect changes in prices of commercial property? Then we need to be aware, what is the relationship between the two? So the next thing is, when we talk about relationship, just now earlier on, we realized that we have exhausted competitive in demand already, right? Yes? Okay, so now let's do a quick breakdown of what are the relationships being involved. Okay, so when we look at relationships between goods, we want to look out for competitive in demand, joint in demand, competitive in supply, joint in supply, and derived demand. Okay, these concepts, I've covered this in the first year program in depth under our content, so I'm not going to go through these 5 here. Okay, but I just want you all to have a mental awareness. You need to pick one of this. Okay, so earlier on we have exhausted this option, so these are the 4 remaining. So which one of the 4 do you think is likely to be present here? Okay, so if you know the answer, please key into the chat. Okay, if not, I'm going to quickly move on. Right, so if you want to challenge yourself. So the correct answer is competitive in supply. Okay, they have to be competitive in supply. Why? Okay, you can see that when you are allocating more land for residential development, this will deprive the factor input. The same parcel of land cannot be used to develop commercial properties. Okay, and therefore for the commercial property market, it will experience a fall in supply. Okay, and an upward pressure on price. So this is how it looks like. Okay, earlier on, we have identified that for private residential property, okay, there are demand factors involved. Right? Okay, B1, B2. So your role is to identify that they are competitive in supply because of, okay, more land is allocated with higher prices. This will induce more private residential property to build more private residence, right? Then this will deprive commercial property from being built. Okay, so supply is going to fall for commercial property. So always be careful, okay, that identifying the 2 relationships are exceptionally crucial. And most of the time, CIS is tested in agricultural goods. Okay, 2 different forms of goods being grown, right? Okay, potato and probably rice. If you grow rice, you cannot grow potato. Okay, so in this case, it is tested from the property perspective. Okay, competitive in demand cannot be used here. Why? Okay, the whole idea is this. You cannot stay in commercial properties. Okay, the usage is different. Okay, commercial properties are for commercial activities. Therefore, you cannot stay. Unlike the earlier example, okay, resale and new flat. Okay, the buyer can choose to stay in either of these. This one is not. It's not a direct substitute. Okay, it's illegal to stay in commercial properties. Are you all following me? All right. So it seems like a lot of you are quite disappointed with the answer. Okay, so like I've said, it is always alright to make mistakes here. Learn from this. Anything that you're not sure, reach out to me. Okay, I am your best bet. But it is not okay to make the same mistake in exam. Okay, so anything that you're not sure, stay back and ask me. If not, book a private consult with me. Okay, we'll get to the ends of whatever that you're not sure. Yeah, so for the viewers out there who's watching this clip, unfortunately, I'm not able to touch your life, but you can drop a comment. Okay, if I got a chance, I'll pick up your comment. Right, okay, part D. Part D is the tough question as well. We don't normally encounter demand and supply measures. Okay, most of the time, okay, the demand and supply framework that we utilize is more like part A and part B. Okay, explaining increasing prices or explaining falling prices. So this is a policy approach. Okay, I want you all to pay attention, okay, on how do we use demand and supply framework, okay, to establish policies. Okay, what kind of policies are present to lower prices? Okay, it's just like, okay, it is just like macro. Okay, if we have learned macro, then we probably learn that inflation, demand pull and cost push inflation, we will need different kind of policies, right? Contractionary demand side policies, okay, and supply side policies. So the idea is the same as macro, but a lot of students somehow could not apply on the micro perspective. Okay, so if you have learned macro already, I think there is a very good start. You can start to apply the same thing, thought process, work backwards on micro. So the whole problem here is high property prices, right? Okay, so how do we address this? Okay, so the measures here, okay, you have to identify that this is a demand and supply measure. Okay, so what kind of demand measure could lower price? Okay, it has to be a fall in demand or an increase in supply. So for fall in demand, we need to look out for the extract of band aids. For increase in supply, just now I gave you all a hint, right? You need to look out for extract 2, okay, government land sales. Okay, that is probably a supply factor. Okay, so having said that, let's quickly hop into the question. Right, so the idea is we want to introduce demand and supply side measures. You want to define demand and supply for property prices or property in Singapore. If you like, you can also establish the rationale, okay, of lowering prices. Okay, this is to prevent, okay, inequity, okay, to promote equity. Okay, this is optional, but it's good to state why is there a need to do that. Alright, okay, so the first point that I want to bring in is demand side policies. Okay, you can see that in extract 3, okay, it was brought up here. Previous round, stamp duties. Okay, whenever you encounter stamp duty for buyers, you see it's for buyers. Okay, normally when we learn taxes is an indirect tax. Normally. Okay, it affects your supply curve. It affects cost of production. It's only in property market, okay, that we experience direct tax. It's a tax on income. Okay, and this will lower the consumer demand. Okay, so you can actually see here, this is to deter speculative demand. So the common mistakes for students establishing stamp duty is they talk about indirect tax in this case. Okay, so you're supposed to illustrate that this will reduce speculative demand. Okay, so imagine if there's higher property tax, it means that when you sell the property, you are going to incur higher tax on your property gains. Then in that case, okay, would you buy in the first place if you are going to be subjected to a higher tax? Okay, especially for speculative buyers, they are going to buy in anticipation of higher returns in the future, right? Okay, so the direct tax actually acts as a cushion or a suppression, okay, to reduce the future returns. Then in this case, okay, people are unlikely to flip properties. Okay, another term that is used for speculative buying is like prata. Okay, you flip prata, but in this case, you flip property. You buy, sell, okay, and in anticipation of future gains. So you want to talk about transactional costs or lower expected future returns. Okay, this will reduce demand and exert a downward pressure on price. Okay, make sure you relate it briefly to price adjustment process, not SIR, PAP here. Important to relate to PAP, especially for essay-based questions. You must illustrate the surplus and downward pressure on price. Okay, because the question is focused on, okay, lowering of price. Okay, you got to illustrate the process of how it occurs. Okay, so a fall in demand will cause a surplus and a downward pressure on price. All right, limitation. Okay, we can see that the demand side measures, you realize that it was mentioned in extract 3 is a band-aid, not a cure. Why is it only a band-aid? Okay, band-aid is just like plaster, right? Okay, when you experience a severance of your finger, you put a plaster, do you think the bleeding will stop? It won't stop. Why? Because the problem may be too big. So in this case, if you look at extract 3, okay, realize that many households have amassed cash reserves. So they may not be deterred, okay, by all the cooling measures. So what? Okay, I'm going to anticipate higher future returns. I have the cash reserves. I'll just buy. Okay, so you can talk about this. Right, so you want to talk about supply side measures. You can actually see that for supply side measures, I'm going to move on to the second point. You can look up for extract 2. Okay, you want to relate to the concept of increase in supply. Right, you can see that there are more government land, okay, for open tender. It means that the government will sell the land, okay, to a property developer. Okay, and the property developer will increase the production of residential property. Okay, supply curve shift to the right. Now this is a wet pigs factor. Okay, for those who are not sure. Okay, the number of sellers especially. Okay, the earlier on was Egypt, but it is direct tax is not under Egypt. Okay, unfortunately. So that's why it's a little bit harder for the demand side. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly breeze through. Make sure you use the price adjustment process, PAP. Check. This is going to exert a downward pressure on price especially. Okay, and you want to illustrate the limitation. Okay, so in this case, you want to comment on the time period. Okay, so the tendering of land, the building of properties, all this is going to take time. Okay, it might not offer enough time for prices to be quickly lowered. Alright, your synthesis is going to depend on what you have picked for the earlier 2 points. Okay, so if you bring in time period, then you want to talk about, if you bring in the criteria of time period, then you can evaluate that demand side measures are faster and more effective in the short run. Okay, remember the story that I tell you guys about the rabbit and the turtle? Okay, and what conclusion that we can draw, okay, from the race? Okay, so the conclusion or the synthesis is going to depend on what criteria you use. right? If you talk about speed, okay, the rabbit has a greater promise of finishing the race faster. Okay, but if you are to looking at the magnitude, okay, another thing that you can consider is to critique on what is the magnitude of the stamp duty. Okay, how severe the stamp duties are. Okay, if the stamp duties are exceptionally steep, then this can probably even reduce genuine demand. Okay, people who have a genuine stay might be even cannot be priced out of the market. Alright, okay, so if it is too little, then speculators might anticipate higher future return from selling the property. Then they will still incur the slight increase in property tax, okay, in anticipation for higher returns. Okay, so you want to focus on this criteria, magnitude. Very important, Is everyone good? So if you bring in loan curbs, I'm also going to accept. I'm not sure whether loan curbs is being mentioned. Don't have. Okay, loan curbs. Okay, loan curbs I'm going to accept. It's going to be explained differently. I'm not sure whether you guys have used loan curbs. Loan curbs simply illustrates the restriction of access to credit. Okay, so with loan curbs, it simply means that, okay, consumers will have to put up a higher amount of cash, okay, to buy the house. Okay, it's going to be explained slightly differently from stamp duties. Okay, I'll probably put this under the appendix. Okay, I forgot to put it under the appendix. Okay, I'm going to quickly end off with part E. Okay, discuss the view that a government subsidy for public housing is necessary. Okay, so in this case, okay, this is a thesis, antithesis question. Okay, necessary, not necessary, right? Okay, we can also possibly use the framework of BCC here. What are the benefits of public housing, of a government subsidy under the thesis? What are the costs and constraints for implementing a government subsidy under the antithesis? So you realize that these two normally comes together. Quite nice. Okay, in this phrasing. I don't know whether you guys use the BCC approach. Okay, it works exactly the same. Alright, so let's have a quick introduction. Okay, I'm running a bit short of time. Okay, I hope for your understanding today I'll be ending a little bit later. Can you all stay back for a bit more? Alright, okay, so for public housing, you can see that, okay, why is there a public housing here? Okay, you can quickly introduce to promote adequate and affordable home ownership. Okay, consumption of public housing is likely to exhibit positive externality. Okay, so a subsidy here is to... So the subsidy here, okay, is a direct subsidy, it's not an indirect subsidy. So there's a lot of direct subsidy and direct tax in this question. Okay, so later on I'll explain how a direct subsidy works. Okay, define positive externalities. Alright, so identify the 6 steps that we have often used in the externality framework. Okay, so you're supposed to identify the problem here. Okay, so earlier on you have defined and identified, you have defined positive externalities with step 1. Okay, step 2, cohesive communities, spillover effect. Step 3, rational decision making framework. MPB equals to MPC. So for the viewers out there, if you realize that I'm speaking too fast, it's because most of our students already know these 6 steps. It's just verifying the 6 steps. Okay, so you might want to check out for the market failure content clip to identify how we use the 6 steps in depth. Okay, I'm not sure whether I'll insert the card here, but if I do, okay, you can check it out here. Next, okay, we want to use a diagram. Step 4. Okay, check whether you have the diagram. Just when I screen through your scripts, I think most of you have the diagram. Okay, step 5, you want to illustrate that the presence of the external benefit will lead to a divergence and under consumption. Step number 6 is the most crucial. Okay, a lot of students fail to illustrate how deadweight loss arise. Please look out again. Step number 6 tells us that at the present consumption level, your marginal social benefit exceeds your marginal social cost. So I need to see this phrase. Check. When you're consuming at the present consumption level, the society is going to reap higher benefits as compared to costs for enjoying one additional unit of public housing. So remember, you must illustrate how does the deadweight loss arise. Okay, it doesn't arise naturally. It arises because MSB exceeds MSC. And why does it? And what's the significance of that? So up to here, we are done with the 6 steps. Anyone unclear? Especially for the in-house students. Now, we are going to move on to the policy side. Okay, because the question necessitated subsidy, so we have to extend it. Alright, so a direct subsidy is equivalent to the MEB. Okay, it's granted directly to the consumer. This is a HDB housing grant. Okay, a HDB housing grant is credited to the consumer's account. Okay, is to promote consumption of public housing. So most of the time we shift MPC. This is not the right time. Okay, this is the time that we shift MPB to the right. Okay, so for those who are unsure, direct and indirect subsidy, I'm not sure whether your school uses this approach. Most of the schools do, so check your school notes. Indirect subsidies lowers the MPC. Direct subsidy raises the MPB to the right. Okay, so consumers will enjoy a lower cost of consumption and they will internalize the external benefit. Okay, so this will cause the MPB curve to shift to the right and they will consume at the socially optimal level at QS. So this is how the diagram works. You got to shift to the right. You got to relate to the diagram. Okay, a lot of students fail to relate to the diagram. Okay, they just draw a pretty elephant here. Okay, white elephant. Not pretty, white elephant. Okay, so check whether you have utilized the diagram. Okay, an alternate approach for the thesis, okay, is addressing equity. Okay, I accept that you can use the dollar vote argument. Okay, so because this question is, if you read the phrasing of this question, okay, it is not necessarily market failure or externality centric. Right? So the benefit here could be a goal. Okay, in this case, allocative efficiency or positive externalities being internalized, or it could be equity of lowering prices. So in that case, if you use equity, okay, your illustration is quite similar to what we see in part D. Okay, you can use a demand and supply approach of increasing your. You can use a demand and supply approach. I'm not going to go in depth there. Okay, but always focus on the bigger point. Okay, the bigger point already mentioned here is externality. So try to identify the obvious. Alright, for the antithesis, you want to state how is it not beneficial. Then you want to talk about constraints. Okay, so difficulty to estimate the level of external benefit. Okay, what happens when you over allocate resource? Then this will lead to greater deadweight loss. So a direct subsidy, especially for a direct subsidy, you can show the greater deadweight loss here. Okay, when you over subsidize. And for those who are not sure how to get the triangle, you can stay back and ask me later. Okay, because I'm running a little bit short in time, I need to speed up. Okay, or you can talk about a constraint. Okay, if you provide a subsidy, this is going to worsen your government budget deficit. And this is going to result in opportunity costs incurred in spending elsewhere. If you subsidize too much public housing, then you are going to cut spending on healthcare. You cut spending on public good. Then this is going to worsen society welfare elsewhere. Alright, so if you didn't bring in equity, okay, as a main point, you can consider bringing in under synthesis. Okay, so you can see that a government subsidy is necessary, but it depends on what kind of profile of household that you're looking at. Okay, and how does it impact the alternate objective of achieving equity? So there is unintended benefits of a subsidy. So, okay, if we look at what is different type of household, it simply means that higher income household, they shouldn't enjoy a high level of subsidy. Low income household should enjoy a more equitable distribution of resource. They should have a higher level of subsidy. Okay, so this is what it means. All right. Okay, so I'm so sorry I overextended, but I think I'm doing good with time. Okay, I only spill extra 5 minutes here. Okay, so I'm going to leave the floor, okay, to questions. Okay, if you have any, you can stay back and ask me. All right. If not, I'm going to stop recording. For the viewers out there, like I've said, if you have any questions, you can drop it under the comment.